Everyone. I'm Deepa and part of Beyond the PhD, and we're really happy to have Angie, who's a reporter for Spectrum, join us today. I met Angie at a neuroscience conference last year when she was reporting on some of the research that we do in our lab. And when I started talking to her, I realized that she had a background in neuroscience and got her PhD from NYU. And I told her about Beyond the PhD and some of the stuff that we do. And she was more than happy to do the seminar for us. So thank you, Angie.
You're so welcome.
I'll monitor the chat, but if anyone has questions, Angie's okay with you unmuting yourself.
Yeah, please jump in if there's anything you want me to spend a little more time talking about or anything like that. But yeah, thank you so much, Deepa. I appreciate it. I went to a lot of talks like this when I was a grad student, trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do. So I'm more than happy to return the favor. And so thank you to Beyond the PhD. Thank you, Deepa. Appreciate it. I'm Angie Voyles Askham. I'm a science writer for Spectrum. We're an online publication that covers autism research. And so I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how I made that leap from PhD to science reporter. It was a bit winding, but I'll take you a little bit through my background, tell you, and then I'll also tell you what I do now in my daily life as a science reporter. I'll provide some information about how I see my PhD skills kind of translating to my current work, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. But like Deepa said, if you want to jump in anytime, you're welcome to. Make sure my thing's working here. There we go. Oh yeah, so this is what I just said. But yeah, my background. So I started college at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee in the fall of 2006. I was undecided. My friends made fun of me because I was very indecisive. I was changing my major every week. I loved school in general. I was one of those kind of nerdy kids that end up in PhD programs, and I always loved reading and writing. I didn't know what kind of career that would make. I knew a lot of English majors who had gone on to teach. I didn't think I really wanted to teach. Journalism didn't really cross my mind at the time. But I was closing in on the time where you have to pick a major. I took an intro to biology class that just kind of checked some of the boxes for what you have to do as an undergrad. And I was just kind of struck by how much I loved learning about that or relearning about the cell and the human body. And I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. I could major in biology, or I could go to med school. That was a job I knew was a job, and I could envision what that would be like. And so I walk you a little through this not exactly because you need to know my exact experience, but I think it illustrates something that's helpful for when you're thinking about a career after a PhD, which is not really to think about the job that you want, but to think about, actually skip those, but to think about what do I like to spend my time doing. That's something I've finally learned to come back to in my life. It was kind of a circuitous path to get to where I am, like I said before, but it's back to this realization that I love reading and writing, and I wouldn't change the path. I have my current job because I did that science background, but I think I could have saved myself a little bit of struggle if I just focused on this question, what do I like to spend my time doing? And it turned out it wasn't really being in a lab, it was maybe learning about things. And so that's something that I think about. So I decided I might want to go to med school. Vanderbilt doesn't have a pre-med program, but they have a great neuroscience department. And as a neuroscience major, you have to do some undergrad research. So I joined a lab. I was like, oh, this is awesome. You can ask these crazy questions. You can design experiments. This is what I want to do. I did that research, undergrad research. I also did an internship with the NIH. And that really kind of cemented my plans to go down this research path. I applied to grad school. I went to NYU, where I studied visual development. And I loved it at first. I loved the classes. I loved learning. I just loved being in school more. I really enjoyed thinking about my research problems and diving into the literature and figuring out what needed to be, like what problems needed to be solved. But by about my third year, when you're like really in the thick of the experiments and all, I realized I didn't really love being in the lab. I started to have second thoughts about what to do next. And like I said, that's when I kind of started going to these this sort of talk and figure out like, okay, if I don't want to be in academia, what else is there? So again, coming back to this question of like, what do I like to spend my time doing? And around that time, I started thinking about writing again, something I always loved as a kid. And luckily NYU, like, and I think some other grad schools have this too. It has NYU has this great workshop for researchers called the Science Communications Workshop, where it's through the journalism school actually, and they have journalism professors who teach researchers how to communicate their research more clearly. This was people like Dan Fagan and Steve Hall, who would have us come in once a week for this like 2 or 3 hour session, and we'd write about our work, we'd think about science writing, and we would get really good feedback on how to not write too much jargon and what are the important points you want to get across. So that had me thinking a lot about, okay, this is a potential path. This is something, and reminding myself that this is something I like doing. And around this time, I also was listening to a bunch of podcasts, a lot of radio, spending a lot of time in the lab by myself, setting up experiments, cleaning things, you know. And so I was just trying to think of a new career path. And I thought maybe I could do radio. Maybe I could use my love of communicating ideas and do it in audio form in some way. So next step, I applied to an internship at WNYC, which is a station I listen to all the time. I got the internship. A pro tip, if you're thinking about wanting to like make this kind of pivot, and it's something that I know internships aren't ideal, but like if that's something that's going to be necessary, a lot of internships I found, I'm hoping this is changing, but at the time at least, you had to be a student or a recent student. And so the fact that I was just out of, at the time, once I started, I was just out of my PhD, that checked that box. So that allowed me to get this job, this internship. So yeah, the day after I defended my PhD, I started. I'm not sure I understand. My watch just talked to me. Sorry. So the day after I defended my PhD, I started an internship with the Brian Lehrer Show. I was like, all right, new career, clean slate. I'm going to do something new. I learned how to pitch story ideas, how to think about things in a different way. It was, again, like not science at all, which was kind of just a fun change. And it had me thinking that, you know, maybe there is something else out there that I can do. At that time, I was engaged to my now husband. He took a postdoc at the University of Washington in Seattle. So I moved to the West Coast. I was excited. I was like, this is where I can start fresh. And starting fresh is really hard. I started working at a local community radio station, but they could only pay me part-time. But I learned a lot. Again, I learned more about radio. I learned about editing, producing audio. I filled in for a host when they were out of town. So I was just developing all these new skills, maybe a little haphazardly, but it was fun. I applied for a bunch of other full-time jobs, the local NPR affiliate, any podcast I could find, no luck. So eventually I took a job in academic publishing. It was with Frontiers in Neuroscience. I had some awesome coworkers, but I didn't find it fulfilling. You know, I wasn't creating something. I wasn't writing. I wasn't making audio. I wanted to do something else. So I kept at the radio, kept learning more skills. In the meantime, we had our first daughter. Travis finished his postdoc. He got a job at NJIT in Newark. And so we moved back to the East Coast. So again, I throw these things in there because like you can make all the career plans you want, but like life happens too, right? You've got to, location matters and family situation matters. I stayed home with our daughter for a while after we moved. I was excited to be back on the East Coast, back near New York, you know, more media jobs. Because I was again thinking this is that's something I still want to do. And I wasn't totally sure what kind of job I wanted though. I was applying, not really, I knew I needed more experience and wasn't sure how to get it. I saw that Springer Nature, so again, I'd had this experience in publishing. I saw that Springer Nature was hiring an intern for their communications team. Really didn't want to do another internship, but I needed to somehow find a way to write, get my name out there while getting paid to some degree. And so that's what I did. They gave me a ton of flexibility. I could write whatever I wanted for their blog. I was getting paid. It gave me some confidence. It gave me some writing samples. And they taught me about marketing and SEO optimization and other skills that I hadn't learned before either. And so around this time, I was also doing some freelance writing for our local town news site. Again, not much pay, but it was great experience. And I did it just kind of in my spare time when I could. So I would say, one thing I was doing at this time, maybe out of, almost a feeling of desperation, but just really trying to grab experience wherever I could get it. And I'd say that, if you do find yourself in this sort of position where you're not sure what your next step could be, just looking, breaking things down into smaller blocks and thinking, okay, what's this next skill I want to build, and finding a way to do that where you can be surrounded by people who might help you and might push you to the next stage can be really helpful. So that brings me to around January, I guess December, January 2020. December, we had our second daughter. We had a newborn and a 2-year-old. I was applying for jobs like crazy. COVID-19 was out there looming. I wasn't aware what was coming yet. I saw that Spectrum, this online outlet that covers autism research, which I had read when I was a grad student, actually. They were hiring for a new news writer. And I was like, okay, that could be awesome, but I don't have that much experience. I have a neuroscience background. It's a long shot. Let's see. Springer Nature was also hiring a books editor at the time, which kind of would take me back down that publishing path, perhaps. And so I applied for both. I heard back from Springer Nature first. I took the job. And then about the first week that I started, I heard back from Spectrum that I'd gotten that job. So it was very awkwardly quit the editing job and took my job here at Spectrum. It was very challenging. May 2020, new job, new skills that I was learning, 5-month-old, 2-year-old at home, COVID, it was a lot. But I knew that at that time that, it was, I felt like I had found the right job for me, really. It kind of married this love that I've always had of writing and learning new things with my interest in neuroscience. And it was just, it was a really satisfying experience, even when it was really hard. And so I'd like to take you back to that question of what do I like to spend my time doing? And so what I get to do now is do a lot of things that I like doing with my time. I like learning new things. Like I said, I like talking with interesting people. That's something that I get to do in my job that I really enjoy. I like sorting through a lot of facts to make sense of something complicated. And I like writing most of the time. Sometimes it can be, a lot, but yeah, I love the idea of putting complicated thoughts to the page. So I guess I'd like to spend this time, talking a little bit about, that's my background. So it got me here, and what do I do every day, I suppose. So my job, I'll break it down into 2 parts. One part is that the first half is finding stories. So as a science reporter, it's my job to hunt. There are so many potential stories out there in the field of autism research and neuroscience. And so a big part of my job is to find the ones that we should cover, whether that's something that we need to cover because it's breaking news or because it's just something that is really compelling. So I spend a lot of time talking with researchers, attending conferences, reading papers, looking through Twitter, anything that I can do to find interesting interesting research that's happening and interesting human stories too. And the second part is writing the story. Again, you go back and read the papers and talk with the researchers again, talk with outside researchers about the work to get their opinion on it. Write, edit, fact check, do more editing, all of that process. So that's most of my day. It's talking to people and it's writing. And even it's interesting because I'm quite an introvert most of the time, but so it's something to think about but I really like talking to people when there's like a purpose, if that makes sense. And so the idea that I can have these phone calls with people or Zoom calls and talk with them about their research, it's just really like energizing. I'll finish a call with somebody and then just turn to my coworker and be like, oh, I just talked to the most awesome person. So it's really exciting in that way to learn about the things that people are excited, researchers are excited about. It makes me excited too. So these are some of the kinds of, one of the cool things about my job is I get to write like different kinds of stories. So this is a recent news article that I wrote about like one specific study that was cool. I also write our early career researchers newsletter, which is fun because it's a little like more low key and conversational, and I get to like provide resources to people and advice that maybe I wish I'd gotten as a grad student. I get to write like Q&As, profiles of people talking about their life outside of the lab, which is really fun. And then also kind of longer form featurey stuff where I dive into like what's going on in a field right now. So it's kind of fun to have this like different levels of focus. So if you're thinking, is science reporting right for me? These are a few things to maybe think about, like, do I enjoy these things? Obviously, it's not like a end all be all, but some things to think about. So my coworkers and I have talked about the fact that our job is kind of like being in school again. Again, I said I love school. And so basically you go learn about a topic and you write your report about it. And I've always really liked doing that. And if you like doing that, maybe science reporting is right for you. Do you enjoy writing and talking about science more than actually doing it? That's something I discovered about myself in grad school. I loved conferences and learning about people's work and having the conversations, but in the lab, not so much. That's where I kind of like lost the love for it. And so that makes this a good fit for me, I think. Oh, my video is covering this up. Oh, do you like sifting through past research? I found that one of the things that I enjoyed the most in grad school was like writing the background section of my dissertation. I loved like the thinking through, what the history of things and, how do all the puzzle pieces fit together. Learning one thing I really like my job is I get to dive really deep into a topic and then move on from that and write about a new topic the next week. It's kind of nice. I know that other people, for a PhD, there are other people who love, or for academia in general, people who love going deep on the same topic and like branching off and keep digging as much as possible. I like jumping around a little more, which is great for my current job. And this is kind of silly, but my coworkers and I have talked about how, not in a bad way necessarily, but we're just kind of nosy. We just want to know what's going on. And so that makes being a reporter a really good fit, because I just got to know, like, wait, what happened there? Please tell me. So if that sounds like you, then maybe this is a good fit for you too. One of the biggest challenges, as kind of my background suggests, is breaking in, though. There are some more straightforward ways and less straightforward ways. And maybe, I didn't go the most straightforward way, but hopefully I'm here to show you that, there are multiple ways to do it. One of the most straightforward ways is the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship. So this is something that you can do as a grad student. It's a 10-week program that you do during the summer. And you apply, it's pretty competitive, but when you apply, you get placed in a newsroom across the country. So places like NPR, Wired, Scientific American, Stat, they take these fellows and you get to work in their newsroom, get that hands-on training, you get the experience, you get to, the bylines right away. And I know a lot of people who end up in science journalism, that's where they started. My editor, for example, that's where they got their start. It's a great experience. I wish I had even thought to do this, but hopefully letting you know can be helpful. So science communications workshops, like the one that I did in grad school. I know that other universities that have partnerships with their journalism school have programs like this, and it's great for just getting your feet wet in science writing. Internships. So we at Spectrum take on interns so we currently have a spring intern, we'll have a summer one, we have a fall one. We take on interns with various backgrounds. A lot of them are in grad school or in like journalism school, but it's not a requirement by any means. And so there are a number of different opportunities for internships out there. And this is one of the most straightforward path, but journalism school. It's great because there are a number of really good science journalism schools, like so NYU's SHERP program, for example. I know MIT has a program, UC Santa Cruz has a program. So this is awesome. I mean, you get all the training, you get all the connections. It costs money is the downside for sure. So that's something to think about if that is a route you want to go. And freelancing is an option. It's, again, a little harder, but places like Spectrum, we take pitches from freelancers. So if you have an idea for a story that you'd want to write, a lot of times you can look at an outlet's at their website and you'll see the kinds of pitches they take, how they recommend that you send them along, and that's a great way to make connections and get your name out there. And so transferable skills. So when you're applying to these jobs and feeling like I don't have the skills or I don't have the experience, I'll tell you a few things that I've learned over the past few years that have really helped me in my job that I learned in my PhD. One is that, and this is kind of obvious, but a PhD, you have a PhD, that means you can get things done. And so when you're applying to jobs, that's, I think it's easy to take for granted when you're in academia and like everybody has a PhD. But when you're applying to other jobs, that does look good. That means something. So yeah, don't take that for granted. You know how to sift through the research. So that's been a big thing as a science reporter. I feel like the time I spent in grad school gave me the skill to look through papers and be able to kind of sort through them easily and see what's the gist of this? Is this relevant to us or not? And that saves a lot of time when you're digging through papers all day long. Another important thing is that the history of the field. If you end up, so I know this isn't always the case, but because I have a background in neuroscience and now I write a lot about neuroscience, I know what are kind of like the big topics? Where did this come from? What are the controversies and things like that? When you have the PhD background, that can be really helpful. Also knowing how academia and science work in general, just some of the rules, why was it controversial that this person was the first author, like weird little things like that, that coming from academia, a little more than someone else might. And lastly, knowing how to speak the language. So I don't usually disclose right away, if they asked, I would tell them, but I don't usually tell sources I'm talking with that I have a PhD in neuroscience because I want them to talk to me like as if I know nothing, just because it makes it easier. But every once in a while it does come up, and sometimes that can be helpful. But even if I don't tell them, I end up knowing kind of, there are little things they might say off the cuff, or little asides, oh yeah, we did that using CFOS or whatever, and I don't have to go down a tangent and be like, wait, what did you say? What does that mean? So that helps, I think, make things a little easier sometimes. Just knowing the language that they speak in science can give you a little boost when you move into science writing. And that's the gist of what I had. I'm happy to take questions or go back to anything if you'd like more information. But you can also reach me at, so that's my Twitter handle down at the bottom. You can find me at LinkedIn or email me at Angie@spectrumnews.org. But yeah, happy to hear any thoughts.
Thank you so much, Angie. That was really, really useful information. There are a few questions in the chat. I can read them out. So Rachel wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about navigating the difficult conversation of leaving a job right after you started it. It seems like you're more clearly interested in the job you have currently, but I know we don't ever want to burn bridges in science where everyone seems to know everyone. So how would you balance searching a job with different deadlines like that?
That was one of the harder things I've had to deal with. Luckily, my manager was just the kindest person and completely understood. I told her, I was just very open. I wasn't sure how to handle it at first. And then I decided that I should just be very open about the situation. I told her, I've been trying to do this for a really long time and I've loved what, I've really appreciated this work. I, loved what you taught me. I appreciate all of that training, but, I feel like I have to do this. And she understood. So I think, just being open and, because I think that's the best way to not burn bridges. You don't want to lie to people. You don't want to, lead them, string them along in the wrong way. So yeah, I think openness is helpful.
Another one is, have nonprofits or academic entities been helpful as contacts for information, connections, and source materials?
Like, I'm wondering if they mean like communications departments maybe, or
Richard, could you clarify that, please?
Sure. In business, sometimes, we deal with academia, or, with nonprofits as business contacts. I was wondering if that's, part of your, source network, and has that been helpful to you as a journalist?
Yes, so I do. So sometimes I get emails from, places like, organizations that are working on things that they have like a press officer and things like that. And it's always helpful to hear from them and hear like what's going on at the moment. I tend to, I guess most of my story ideas come from talking with the researchers themselves, I'd say. But it is helpful to hear, from the organizations themselves, if they have, especially if they have, certain stories that they think are particularly interesting, or things like really cool videos, that would be great for stories, things like that I might not know about just reading a paper, for example.
Another question is, how do you deal with employers that question your career transitions?
I found that I was pretty lucky that people were pretty open. Even, I feel like I was self-conscious about it sometimes. And I think just when I would end up talking with people, and I think, first of all, the cover letter when you're applying to jobs is a great place to explain that. First of all, I would think I was always very passionate and open about what I was trying to do and what I was trying to get out of this. Why is this a good fit for me? Because these are the skills that I knew that I didn't have, that I was hoping to learn. And so I think being clear about that, like, these are the skills that I'm looking for, rather than I'm moving all over the place, so I think that's maybe one way to help. And then also just talking with people. I never actually spoke with the employers and told them, what my hopes are, what my goals are, and where my enthusiasm was. I think that helped any questioning they might have.
For interns at your publication who are currently students, or any other student interns you've come across, do they typically take time off from their school or research to be interns, or are they part-time?
So the interns that we've had, at least during my tenure here, who were current grad students, did it during the summer, I think. And so, they didn't have any classes at the time. I think they sometimes do only, maybe not full time. It's maybe not 5 days a week here. They'll maybe do 4 and keep one to do their keep some research going or things like that. So I think there's some flexibility there. But in general, yeah, I think summertime is when those, student interns tend to do their work.
For someone who wants to have a career in writing, but they aren't very good at writing, but they really like to write, what sort of advice do you have?
I would say read. I mean, this is a maybe cliched answer, but reading, definitely. That's like the first place to start. Do lots of reading and see how other people are communicating certain ideas that you are thinking about. There are some really good books about science writing in particular, or science journalism in particular, even. There's A Tactical Guide to Science Journalism is really great for like learning about the different parts of the job. For writing specifically, what is it called? I think On Writing Well is pretty good. And one that I've heard is really good, I haven't read yet, is Bird by Bird. I think that's is that Ann Patchett maybe? Or no, someone, anyway, rambling. But yeah, I would look up some, do some studying yourself, some reading about the skills, and then getting edited. Oh my gosh, that's like getting that feedback. That was one of the things that I was most excited about, honestly, getting this job, was to get some good, real direct feedback as far as what am I, because that is a frustrating thing. I know when you're at a point in you're at a skill level where you know that your writing isn't good enough, but you don't know how to make it better. And so I feel like I was at that place for a long time, and having editors tell you, oh no, if you structure the sentence like this, it's much more clear, and things like that. And so if you're not in a position to be full-time edited, things like a workshop or something like that, I would recommend looking at the journalism school that's at the university you're affiliated with, if that's an option. Looking at online courses. I think, so the website Poynter, Poynter, has a number of like reporting courses online. I don't know if they're writing courses, because that might be a little trickier, but yeah, I can look for some and maybe send them to you if anyone's interested in other workshop options.
There's one other question. What is your relationship like with biotech or medical device companies, or are you more focused on academia?
I'm mostly, well, I wouldn't say that's true. So in the past, I've mostly focused on academia just because that's where my experience is, but I have written a bit about like biotech companies and things like that, which I find really interesting. And also we have an editor on staff who has a lot of experience writing about biotech too. And so I've learned a lot from him. The whole world of like companies is something that's very new to me, and business and things like that. So that's been fun to learn about and write about. But I don't have much background in biotech, and so it's been more of a learning experience. Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Actually, one more question. I was curious, when you were working in your various roles as interns, are there typically clear paths forward, like at the same company for people like that? Or is it more so you'll probably have to jump around to find a full-time position?
I think often so in my cases, there weren't, mostly because when I was at WNYC, I was moving like right away. And then when I was at Springer Nature, my mentor was hopeful. She was kind of disappointed there wasn't a full-time position open. And so I think that, and she actually served as my letter of recommendation, one of my recommenders for the position I eventually got at the company in a different department. But so I think that, yeah, having that relationship, it's not always the case, I'd say. For example, like here, when we have interns, we don't always have a position open that they could take on next, but sometimes they do. We did have an intern who ended up getting a position here. So I think it's just kind of, if you're in the right place at the right time, sometimes it works out. And if you're at the right place at the maybe a little too early, at least you'll have that connection and hopefully, be able to get some information when if there is a position down the line.
What have you or your colleagues done to reach out to industry as sources and interview subjects?
So I've talked with a few people who've made the transition from academia to industry. And I definitely like to do that more because that's always interesting to people, I think. I think I did a Q&A with someone a while back. I want to, when you say reach out, is Richard there? Do you mean, what do you mean by reach out?
Well, either as sources or source material, or to get a perspective on things like what is the reality of gene therapy? What does it really take? What are some of the new technologies? How do you commercialize academic discoveries?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, a lot of times my way in is like through the researchers. So I'll be talking with, because it's like a publication that I've read about, or a scientific publication. I'm interested in the science, and so I talk with the researchers, and then I follow. Okay, now they have a company, and so I'm interested in what that company is doing. But I think that's usually my path in, is from the basic research. But does that answer your question or no?
I was just wondering if your audience is more in academia or as an organization, whether you'd be interested in hearing more from industry.
We're always interested in hearing from industry for sure. I think our mission specifically is to write about like the basic research, but obviously that has like tons of implications as far as, like you said, like gene therapies and things like that, which we cover as well. So yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess not. Thank you so much, Angie.
You're so welcome. It's such a pleasure to talk with you. And if anyone has, like I said, any questions, please reach out, and I'll send along some of those book recommendations that I have in case anyone's interested.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Sure. Bye, Deepa. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye.